As a content marketer, evergreen content really is the gift that keeps on giving. It has sustained interest over time, so it generates a steady stream of traffic. Plus, all the repurposed content you create from it will have a longer shelf life too, meaning the ROI is high. So, how do we define evergreen content? What are some great examples of it? And why is it so repurposable? Listen on to find out. You're listening to the Content 10x podcast, where it's all about content repurposing. I'm Amy Woods, and I'm here to help you maximize your content and find smart ways to get your message in front of more of the right people, whilst also saving time. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Content 10x podcast. I'm your host, Amy Woods, the founder and CEO of Content 10x. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking about evergreen content, what it is, what it's not, and the repurposing benefits. Of course, there's always going to be the repurposing angle on the Content 10x podcast. So what is evergreen content? I know you've heard the term hundreds and hundreds of times, but just so we're all on the same page, let's just look at what it is. So basically, it's any content you create. For example, content for your website, blog posts, social media, podcasts, that has an always-on level of relevance. It stands the test of time. It's the content that we all want and need in our content strategy. So in this episode, I'm going to cover the different types of evergreen content, examples of what evergreen content is and some of what it's not, and the repurposing benefits with evergreen content. Now, before I get to the main content, just to mention, if you want weekly content repurposing tips and guidance, industry updates, inspiring stories, exclusive news and more, delivered straight to your email inbox, then join hundreds of marketers, business owners and creators and become a Content 10x insider. Just head to content10x.com/newsletter. Now, back to evergreen content. I love evergreen content because it is wonderful for repurposing. Let's look at what it is. So there are 2 degrees of evergreen content. The first is content that is all about things that will never change. It's timeless content that will always be useful and valuable to your audience. For example, for a business that creates content to help empower sales teams, an evergreen piece of content might be 3 powerful words to use in a sales negotiation. That's a timeless piece of content. Whether you're selling horses to cowboys in 1622 or electric cars to people today in 2022, if those powerful words are useful, the content is useful, so it's evergreen. But then content called, for example, the best sales events to attend in 2022 is going to be pretty out of date in 2023 and onwards. Or another example could be 10 sales tools everyone needs in 2022. Now, with evergreen content, no matter what time of year or how many years pass, there are always a lot of people who are going to be interested in and searching for these topics, and the content is always useful. Then there is another type of content that is kind of evergreen, which is content that will sort of last forever, but maybe need a refresh at some point. For example, as technology and tools change. So an example of this could be the best way to repurpose your video into a podcast episode, or how to repurpose a podcast episode into audiograms. This might change at some point, so it will remain evergreen until the process changes, if it does. It might be that you need to just swap in some different screenshot images or update a process flow within that blog post or podcast episode or video, whatever it may be. So it's kind of evergreen, as in it's very valuable now whilst everything within it is truthful and up to date, but you just need to keep an eye on it and maintain it and keep it evergreen. So let's look at some examples of content that lends itself to being evergreen. You probably have a supply of these already available. I'm sure you're very familiar, but let's just run through some examples anyway. So there are frequently asked questions, how-to guides, case studies. So over time, look to see if they need updating, but generally case studies will be evergreen. Tutorials, again, just make sure it's not going to quickly fall out of date. Sharing research findings or a study that you've done. Listicles, a best practice style guide, so video repurposing best practices or podcast best practices. product or service reviews, as long as the product or service is still as it was, content reviews, blog reviews, book reviews, YouTube channel reviews, and glossaries as well. So, for example, a complete glossary of repurposing terms. So, that's examples of the kinds of evergreen content that we see. Basically, it's the opposite of seasonal and topical content, which includes topics that are tied to a certain time of year or a trending event in the news or on social media. So, for example, content called Who Will Be the Next Prime Minister in the UK, published in October 22 and debating if it's going to be Boris Johnson again or Rishi Sunak or whoever, that's immediately out of date when we know the answer, we know who the Prime Minister is, and that content has completely moved on. So that kind of content is important to create. I'm not saying that you shouldn't create topical content, it definitely has its place, but we're focusing on evergreen content right now and the benefits of that. We should invest time in creating great evergreen content because of its longevity, the return on investment that we get from it, and because it has huge repurposing potential as well. The great thing is that the repurposed asset should have longevity and a strong return on investment too. So I'll come on to more of that in a moment. Firstly, let's look at how do you go about ensuring the content that you want to be evergreen actually is evergreen. So here's 3 tips. Number 1, choose topics relating to what your audience want to know. So evergreen content revolves around keywords. So select topics relevant to your business or brand that your audience often ask about or engage with. So you must do keyword research. There are lots of tools to help you with this. You can do research with Google AdWords Keyword Planner. Then there are paid tools like SEMrush and Moz. We use Wincher at Content 10x. There's also really useful resources like Answer the Public, Ubersuggest, Google Trends, Keyword.io. The metric to pay the most attention to with evergreen keywords is search volume. So you want to look for a search volume of around about more than 1,000 searches per month. If a keyword is bringing in that number on a monthly basis, then you can pretty much guarantee that there is a long-term sustainable interest in that topic. Now, that's not to say that without that number, without 1,000 searches a month, you shouldn't create the content, because it does depend on how niche you are too. For example, the content we create at Content 10x, it's often very niche, so search volumes aren't always super high. We make sure it's content that our audience want though. We do research keywords and we monitor the keywords and the performance over time. But we also just do research into our audience. I recorded some great episodes on finding out what your audience want from you and how you can help them. So check out 5 Ways to Dig for Content Gold. That's episode 261. So that's at content10x.com/261. And also check out How to Ask Your Audience What They Want. That's episode 263. So go to content10x.com/263 for that one. They both have a podcast. They both have a blog post as well. So whether you want to listen or read, do go check both of those out. Okay, number 2, avoid reference to specific events or dates. This might sound obvious, but it's so easy to slip up on this one, especially when you're adding calls to action. Things like read last week's blog post instantly removes your content's evergreen potential. So instead of referencing a time frame, use things like a headline instead. I literally just did this myself. I didn't say, go and check out the episode we did 2 weeks ago on asking your audience what they want. I gave the name of the episode and the URL. So things like that, so saying things like in the past year, Instagram made some big updates, could be changed to in late 2021 and the first half of 2022, Instagram made some big updates. And that instantly becomes more evergreen. Another thing to remember is even massive catastrophic global events won't be relevant forever. So if you've referenced, in these unprecedented times or as things get back to normal in your content, in a couple of years, that might highlight the fact that this content is out of date. And you just have to ask yourself, is it really relevant? Is it really important to be making these references? Now, I really do hope that it won't be relevant in a few years and that we aren't going to stay in unprecedented times forever. Personally, I'm looking forward to precedented times, not unprecedented times. But just have a good review of your content and pick up on anything that with just a minor tweak turns the phrase used from non-evergreen to evergreen. Number 3, remember to update it as and when required. I've already mentioned this, but keep an eye on your evergreen content and plan to spruce them up every now and then. So I mentioned already, update references to statistics or figures, remove tools that may no longer exist or platforms. Also, something new might have happened related to the topic. So add in anything like that. It gives you a chance to reshare and repurpose that content as well. So your process flow should be create, repurpose, distribute, optimize. Now, you've probably heard me say before, with quality content comes quality content repurposing, and never has this been more the case with your evergreen content. It makes total sense that evergreen content will be repurposed into more evergreen content. So, for example, your evergreen blog post that you repurpose into a LinkedIn image carousel, a LinkedIn article, an infographic, and a script for a video. All of that new content gets the evergreen tick too, so it will have a greater ROI and be shareable over and over and over again. Now, you can put repurposed content into your content treasure trove. Check out episode 178 in our blog post as well at content10x.com/178. It's called How to Create a Content Treasure Trove for Unlimited Repurposing. It's a really, really useful episode. And when you have all of this repurposed evergreen content, that's prime for going in your content treasure trove. Because we put so much time into creating content, especially quality pillar evergreen content. But it's really okay that we do that because evergreen content benefits our audience for a long time and us for a long time as well. And then the high repurposing potential. So we spend a lot of time on repurposing too. But we know that the repurposed content will be evergreen, timeless, and continue to have potential to generate a solid return on investment in the time and resource that we put into it for a long time, perhaps forever. So it's a very worthwhile activity. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Really, I just wanted to highlight to you the importance and the repurposing benefits of evergreen content. Now, if you're looking for help when it comes to repurposing your evergreen content or any content for that matter, our services at Content 10x may be just what you need. We provide fully end-to-end done-for-you video and audio repurposing, whether you have a weekly podcast or video show, maybe regular webinars, an event, thought leadership content, we can help you. Just head to content10x.com to learn more. Now go to the show notes if you want to find links to anything I've mentioned in this episode, and please do subscribe to our newsletter as well, the Content 10x Insider. Go to content10x.com/newsletter. You can follow us on the social media channels at Content 10x on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Connect with me as well, Amy Woods, on LinkedIn. And when you send the connection request, let me know that you've listened to the show. I'd really appreciate that. So again, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Hope it's been super interesting. Hope that you are now going to embrace evergreen content, maybe review some of the content you already have and just make some tweaks to make it even more evergreen. Okay, all that's left to say is thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode.